All right, I'm with my Regal 2800, and before I put it in the water this year, I want to install a Volvo Penta Salt Flush Kit. And so this is basically a kit, rather than do a freshwater flush, which I'm not going to be able to do as this boat's going to be on a mooring. It's more a chemical flush to neutralize the effects of the salt in the raw water system. So you can get more information online. There was a really good website that showed the effects of, there were 4 or 5 different experiments with just straight salt water and some other products, but the Volvo Penta Neutra-Salt seemed to be the best. It really did make a big difference, so I'm pretty convinced that it'll help, and it's a relatively easy install, so really not many downsides to it. So let's take a look. All right, trying to get out of the sun so that we can see this stuff, but this is the box it shipped in. This is the container that you put the solution in. Comes with a quart. This is mine, and the wiring, solenoid, switch, and the instructions. So let's just start looking at what we need to do here. All right, here's the engine compartment of my boat. So let's just talk about what happens here. So you put that solution in the container. I'm going to probably mount it in this area. Then the solution goes to a solenoid, which gets actuated by a switch up at the cockpit. So when the switch is pushed, it's going to allow that solution to flow through a hose and into the raw water input, which comes before the raw water pump. So that water pump right here is for raw water. This engine's got a heat exchanger, so it's got dedicated coolant in the block, so we're only dealing with the raw water part of the system. So that solution comes in at the intake of this raw water pump, and then it gets pushed through the system, through the heat exchanger, the risers, and hopefully neutralizes the effects of salt, or at least helps. So that's basically how it works. Container there, push button up at the cockpit, and what you do is right before you're done for the end of the day, you push and hold the button for a period of time, 45 seconds, and then you turn the key off. And that's basically it. So all right, let's start looking at the install. All right, if you look at the engine compartment here, there's really not a lot of options to mount this container. Most of this is hull and floor, and I kind of zeroed in on this area right here. The other constraint is this big box that's attached to the hatch, right? So when you lower the hatch, this thing's going to come down into this space. So it's not like I could mount it down here, but if I mount it here like that, this part will stick out. It'll be secure though. I mean, half of this will be secured. Then the solenoid will go below. Solenoid has to go 6 to 12 inches below. So this is kind of where I ended up thinking I want to mount things. But before I do, I want to make sure I can get the wiring from there all the way. If you notice, this is where the OEM wiring is. It goes in right there through a channel that's almost impossible to look through. Below this compartment, I mean, some of the connections are to the battery cutoff switch, right? So it comes up and then continues on to the helm here. And what I did do is I removed this panel. There was a panel here with 4 screws, and I was able to look down there, and that does join the channel. It goes kind of down and into that wiring access. So my hope is that I can run a fish through here and have it come out this end and then from there I can just route it over to the container. Now I'm going to put a metal fish through, so there is live power. Even when we turn the battery switch off, you do know that there's, you know, live 12 volts to the battery switch. So if I'm going to be shoving metal through there and poking around, I don't want to hit the positive, the 12 volt, and short it against any ground. So my plan is I'm going to remove the battery posts on both batteries. That way I don't have to worry about power. And then let's see if we can get that fish to come through so we can grab the wiring for the Neutra-Salt. All right, positive post is off the battery. You can see I snapped the fastener there. Didn't look that bad, but it was definitely seized. Okay, so you can see I have a length out all the way that should make it. So let's start feeding it through. Okay, so we got the snake through. You can see it goes in there with all the other wiring, and it was kind of a two-man job, honestly, because I was trying to put it through. I just never knew if I was close. Here it is here. I had this light, so, and I had somebody looking down behind here to tell me if I'm getting close or not. So anyway, it's through. All right, so what I was going to do is try to attach this to the snake and then pull it through, but I was afraid this may get caught on something. And then when I actually looked at the total length of wire I have, it's really not going to make it from here to the helm. It's not. So I'm going to have to add wire to this. So if that's the case, I'm just going to cut it here, pull this through right now, and then I'll add a length. And you know, when we get to it, add a length and then make my connections in the back. But honestly, this part of the project is probably the toughest, is just trying to get the wire through. So let me do that, and we'll be back. All right, you can see here I've got the red wire attached. I cut it. The other end is the lug that's going to go on the switch. So let me pull this through at this end. I want to use two hands. I'll be back. All right, so I'm trying to get the hard stuff out of the way first. So we ran that wire. Haven't done anything with it yet, but the next thing is to cut the raw water incoming supply to the impeller right here. And if you look, there's two hoses. I'm holding the camera, hopefully you can see. The big diameter is the supply, the other goes out to the heat exchanger. So we need to cut into that big diameter hose. That hose goes through this drain system here and is down below. I'm going to get down there and I'll show you more, but that's where I'm going to make the cut, after the drain system. So let me get down there. Okay, hopefully you can see this. That hose that makes that 90 degree into that metal bracket, that's where I need to cut. I want to cut on that little straight section after the 90 degree. I pierced it with a cutter, box cutter. I tried my multi-tool cutter, multi-material cutter. That didn't do it. I think the blade's too dull. So I'm just gonna have to work it with a box cutter. So let me get down there. You can probably see it's leaking a little bit because there's still water in the system, antifreeze actually. But let me go down and make my cut. All right, I'm gonna try to get a shot of this hose that I just cut through. I gotta get down in here. All right, hopefully you can see it. This is very low in the bilge. And now that it's cut through, I need to get my T on it. Okay, so here's my T. So I've got to spread the two hose ends apart, get the T on it, of course have the hose clamps ready to go, and tighten down hose clamps. Then the small tube from the solenoid goes onto this nipple here. So I can't do this with the camera. Let me get down there and try to fit this, and we'll be back. All right, hopefully you can see that with the T on there and the hose. Yeah, sorry I couldn't show how to, how I cut that hose and the work down there. It's very difficult. You can see how narrow, and I'm kind of like on my back upside down with both hands on tools. It's difficult. I did use the box cutter, and then when I got enough of a cut into it, I was able to use this tool to get a nice clean straight cut across the whole hose. So anyway, hose clamps are tight. Now it's time to route this cable to the solenoid. Okay, so the plan is we'll take this hose, route it through this divider. I'll make a hole, and then bring it over to where the solenoid and the container will be. So let me get a hole saw. So let me show you, I put 2 holes here. I've got some nice stainless fasteners that are gonna go into that wood board there. If I tried to do through holes, like I'm only fastening it on one side, so there's not gonna be any on this side. So it's really not gonna work. So I needed to go through hole like that. So let me place that in there and try to mark my holes. All right, container's attached here. It'll clear this engine cover now when it comes down. The hose below goes to the solenoid, that's attached, and that hose goes to that raw water hose from the drive to the impeller. Okay, just keeping you up to date here. So we've got this cable connection is there, and then the hose and the electrical goes out that same hole. The negative runs along that existing wiring, comes up, and it's going to go to the negative post. You can see it's not connected yet. Positive, I am connecting a length of wire so that I can bring it back over to that wire that we ran through the channel. So let me keep going. All right, getting there. Can't wait for this boat to actually be in the water, but we got to get through this stuff first. All right, see, this is my fish, the snake here that I've snaked through the dash down to there, and now I can pull this end of that wire from the solenoid. All right, so let me tape that up and pull it through, get it behind the dash, and then we have to cut a hole for the switch. All right, so here's my wire. I've got to figure out where to put the switch. Obviously not looking to make my life more complicated. Someplace straightforward. If it was somewhere here, that would be difficult because you can't get from underneath. You have to go down and around the dash to get to these areas, so it's pretty difficult. Now these plates have these torque screws, so they can be removed, and my first thought was, wouldn't it be great if it just fit in one of these cutouts, because I don't have a windshield wiper. What if I could just put it right there? Well, I actually removed the panel, removed one of the switches, looked at the cutout, and it just simply is too big for this, so it's not going to work. I can't put it here, which brings me here. Now I could cut a hole, put it over here on the side. It's not going to line up with everything, but it's probably the easiest way to go. And then the other thing is I could, come up to this panel, remove everything, put a cutout here. If you remember, if you were with me when I did the Garmin, this is aluminum. I think this is plastic, but this is aluminum. It's not the easiest to cut, and to make a precision you know, cut out for this would be difficult. So I'm leaning toward here. All right, so they give you a template in the back of the manual, so I've taped it on here. So I'll make my cuts, probably just use a drill in the corners and then go from there. This is aluminum, folks, not plastic. Oh, I'm bummed. Okay, I'm going over to the Dremel. Nothing's easy. Alright, had to switch grinding wheels because the other one, the diameter was too big. So let's see if I can finish with this. Alright, let's see. It looks like most of this is cut through. Just for the record, I freaking hate cutting metal like this. This is not my jam at all. I have no idea if that's the right size, but I'll probably grind down the edges so it's not as sharp, but let's take a look, see if it fits. Okay, so once again, doesn't quite fit. It's close. Let me grind that down and see if I can open it up a little. Alright, there it is. You can see a tiny little bit of exposed metal there. I mean, I'm fine. Let's keep going. Alright, so I've got the panel back in place. This is the wire that was up here that comes from the solenoid. So that's going to go into this new switch. And then I found this purple with tape on it. Typically purple is switched positive, which is what we need. We need a positive connection to the other lug on this switch, but it needs to be switched with the ignition. So I'm going to test this and see if that's the case, and if so, I'll just put a female lug on it and we'll connect that up. Sorry that the camera's in your face, but this is the best I can do. Alright, so I just tested this and it is indeed switched 12 volt positive. Okay, so now I've got power, I've got the solenoid. I'm not going to button this up till I test it, but okay, I just want to point something out that I went directly from that purple, which I'm certain that is fused, because if you look under here, you'll see those are all the breakers for everything in the dash. Okay, so I used that directly to the switch. If I wasn't sure about the wiring, I could use this. This comes in the kit. So this is an inline fuse. So you just run your positive at one end through the fuse to this lug that goes on the switch. So, all right, just wanted to point that out. Okay, so I did have to make some changes. I tested the solenoid, that went well. I went to lower the engine compartment cover, and the cover hit the container. It hit right here, came into contact with it. This part, which I was most concerned about, was fine. This just clipped it, and then I was faced with, where am I going to put it now? This is after I've already cut the hoses, ran the wiring. There weren't a lot of options to begin with. So I kind of bit the bullet and I mounted it back there. That's not going to be easy to fill up, but hopefully I'll only have to do it, you know, a couple times a season. And if you notice, so I had to extend that first hose, and that goes to the solenoid that's connected, you know, it's fastened to the floor. And I was able to preserve the same hose, this length here, which was good. I didn't have to go back into the sump. And the wiring all stayed the same. So, you know, better in some ways, worse in others. But anyway, it's in there. Now I want to test it. All right, so I've got a hose coming down from the house, and it goes to this. This is a Camco winterizing kit. So I use this. The boat got delivered. It was snowing out, and it came up from North Carolina, and they had just done a sea trial. So there was no coolant in the raw water part of the system. So when I got the boat, I ran some antifreeze through there. So I don't need to do that now, but this is a pretty handy device to control the water into the raw water system. So I've got my hose from the house here. I can turn it on and off. The water's going to flow right in through here and go to the impeller, and then out, you know, through the heat exchanger and all that. So when I turn this on, you know, I'll start the engine, have this on, we'll get water flow, and then I can actuate that solenoid and see if that tank goes lower. You can see that second red mark. I lost some of the solution with all the moving around. So that second mark is where we're at. So let's start this engine up. It hasn't been started in 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Not quite sure. I think we're all set. We'll turn this water on now. Actually, I should have ran the air out of this system because there's so much hose coming from the house. Let me put the camera down and run the air out. Okay, we should be good now. Let's turn this back on. All right, I can't hold this. Sure we're getting water flow out here. Okay, that looks good. What's going on with my voltmeter. I had to remove that when I went to do the Garmin, and now that thing's kind of flaking out, but all right, so if I hold this for 45 seconds, we're gonna see if that level goes down. If I can position the camera here. All right, that looks like it worked fine. Saw that level go down. I'm going to shut this engine off. Now supposedly you shut the engine off while the while that's still actuated, and that keeps the stuff in the system. So basically I just ran through whatever I had there. Alright guys, hopefully you got something out of this video. If you're thinking about doing this system, you saw a little bit of challenges. The worst part about this type of thing is working with the constraints of your boat. So depending on how easy or hard it is to find a place for the tank, to get at the hose, and also to run the wiring, you know, that'll kind of determine how difficult this task is. But if you just look at it as a system, it's a pretty straightforward, simple system. You just have to figure out how to mount it into your boat. But that's about it. Hopefully this helps.